My name's Anthony DiMare. I am the CEO and co-founder of Nautilus Labs. We are a maritime data analytics company here in New York. So we're based right over by Grand Central Station. And the kind of large topic that I want to delve into today, and I just want everyone to kind of keep this in the back of their mind, is the concept of optimizing the high seas, right? And so this is a really, really important thing because not only does it kind of represent and support global trade, which essentially I can assume most of the things in this room probably traveled on a ship once upon a time. So that's everything, not just the finished goods that we see and we use all the time, but all the raw materials that went into making those finished goods. And so oftentimes people get really locked into thinking that shipping and ships is all about containers, when in reality it's something much, much bigger. It's something that governments get involved with. It's something that wars are created around, and so it's very exciting. And so who are we, right? We are a seed stage technology company here in New York. Our mission right now is to advance the efficiency of maritime transportation. And so right now we are focusing primarily on commercial vessels. So this is not cruise, this is not pleasure craft, not yachts. These are commercial vessels carrying tens or hundreds of thousands of tons worth of cargo. Some of our backers have also backed some of the most prolific companies of our time, and so that includes Root Ventures, Homebrew, Samil Shah, Sam Altman, as well as Trailmix here in New York, Lee Linden, who has been a part of a lot of different companies, and plus some other smaller ones. And so these people have really helped support us through our journey and really helped grow. But again, the big topic here is really everyone just forgets about ships. So we have tons of companies focusing on how we improve auto, trucks, planes. Hell, space has more companies than companies focusing on the water. That seems broken to me, right? That doesn't actually make any sense. And so just to wrap your head around how big these things really are, this is a VLCC, or a very large crude carrier. Its sole purpose is to carry crude oil. It's either pumped out of the ocean or the bedrock here in the US, travels by pipeline down to the port, and then this thing either goes wherever it may be, Syria to China, US, to be processed. And so this just gives you kind of an idea of just how large these vessels can be. And more importantly, I want you to imagine how big an engine would be that drives this vessel 300 days out of the year. So keep that in mind as well. So first and foremost, let's talk about some ships and maybe debunk some myths that you all have. So on the left, we've got a gas carrier. Its primary goal is to carry different types of gases, so LPG, LNG, those are the primary two. And then you have a tanker, so either crude or processed oil. The ever-famous container ship, which we all know and love. People think about Maersk and that context. And probably one of the more interesting ones right next to it is a bulk ship. Think of that like a vessel that just has a bunch of buckets in it. It carries grain, coal, granite, wood, any of the kind of bulk commodities that go into making many of the finished goods that we have. Those are the kind of ships that are used. And then you have a ro-ro vessel, which is how we transport most of the cars that we make around the world, as well as heavy machinery, other large industrious vehicles that are used everywhere. Now, the kind of staggering facts about ships is they support about $16 trillion worth of goods transport every year. They alone carry about 90% plus, and the exact numbers are a little skewed. Everyone likes to say and think 90%, but most of those stats actually come from container markets. In reality, when you look at global trade and consider all the commodities that get moved, it's actually more than likely much, much larger, but it's a little harder to come to the exact number in that. But also interesting enough, about $400 billion a year is spent moving all of this stuff around the world. And so again, when you think about the concept that everyone has forgot about ships, it's kind of staggering. When you have people looking at space, so there's about 54,000 vessels at sea. And again, some of the interesting things to get out here is about 10% of those are container ships. So container markets are interesting for us and significant, but there are much more interesting vessels that we care about, particularly tankers, bulkers, and we're getting a lot of interest from the gas and general cargo spaces as well. And so these ships burn anywhere between 20 to 150 metric tons of the dirtiest fuel on Earth a day. They are unbelievably pollutant. They are not regulated, despite what the UN and the IMO, the International Maritime Organization, which is the faction of the UN that regulates this, there are no police. And so to give you kind of an idea of what this means is that 54,000 of these vessels are burning anywhere between 2 to 18-wheelers worth of fuel a day, depending on the size of the vessel, the kind of cargo they carry, et cetera. So this is kind of an enormous problem that kind of leads to this point, which really got me personally really interested in this space and why I'm so passionate about it. Shipping alone could, within its own existence in the future, cause this 2 degrees Celsius increase in temperature, in global average temperature, right? And so what do I mean by that? Right now, it represents 2 to 3%, but we have to generally assume that things are going to get better. Regulations will be regulated, it'll take some time, it'll happen. Shipping and aviation are one of these two kind of strange industries where that's highly unlikely to happen. And so what you start seeing here is if we continue to grow at the rate we are now and everything else continues to get better, shipping will account for about 17% in the best case scenario that the industry currently is considering with the technology that we have available to them right now. They expect that will account for about 11% of global emissions, just this industry alone. And the IMO is somewhere in the middle, having no real idea how they're actually going to make that happen. And so if you abide by the carbon limit theory, which is that every industry has X amount of carbon that it can burn right now, shipping has been granted 15 gigatons between now and 2100, and this industry will have met that limit by 2033 right now, if that continues. And so the kind of question I think that becomes interesting and obviously difficult is how on earth can a single company try to solve such a problem of this magnitude? And so I'm going to run through the story of Nautilus a little bit. So I moved to New York City. I went and lived on my buddy's couch. I actually came to Hardwired events very, very long ago. And so this is, again, I was at a Hardwired meetup in the same situation. These were the events that I attended to try and figure out how to break into this space. I ended up working for Bree Pettis through a series of very fortunate events. I got myself very lucky right after he had sold MakerBot. So he was working on a lot of really interesting projects, and I got to be his kind of personal engineer, and he gave me some time to focus on a really interesting industry. And then I met my co-founder, Brian, who had just left his Sequoia-backed startup Action IQ, and I started touting about ships, and he thought it was kind of crazy, and then we secured some money and started growing a team. But how did all that really start? It's about finding the niche. So when you look at the industry, there was a lot of problems with data access. Data integration was this kind of obscure topic that no one really knew how to talk about. There was an immense amount of old technology that would have reminded you of maybe the 80s or even potentially before then. There was no expertise, and the costs in this industry seemed to be this strange concept that no one really actually had any grasp on. And so we found something called Noon Reports, which is the main and proprietary way, well, not proprietary, sorry, excuse me. It is the main way by which 70+% of these shipping companies get data. This is a manual entry form filled out once a day on the vessel. It's then emailed back to shore. And that is how, and they, no joke, they manage their entire fleet and make changes every 6 to 12 months. And so that seems pretty crazy. So we pitched a company that we had met, a set of PDFs that we could do Noon Reports better and we could automate them. We hadn't built any software yet. And so they believed that we could build a solution to do this. And so at that time, we faced several different challenges, one of them being integration. We didn't really know how we were going to go about getting all this data. We knew it was theoretically possible, but we didn't know exactly what that would be. Will they even let us get that data, assuming that they actually want what they just said they wanted. There was market risk. Selling to these companies, shipping companies, is extremely difficult. They have a reputation of not moving quickly on technology, and so that was something for us where we made a bet that something was happening in the market that would change the way they view buying software. And then there's just a general execution risk and logistically, getting devices on ships all around the world sounds crazy. It's not been done very well before, and so there's obviously like a question around, are these guys going to be able to actually pull this off? And does this scale? And so really along this journey, what we found is that the industry just does not have a good idea of what big data is, nor do they have the tools to be able to utilize it in an easy, quick, manageable way. And so we see this as an enormous opportunity to really rethink the way that global trade moves around the world. So shipping companies either have no data at all, and again, I'll just, for purposes of brevity here and to not go too deep into the kind of software they do have, most companies sit in the red areas right now. China sits, actually surprisingly, in the black right now. Those are some of the most poorly run shipping companies in the world and have adopted very, very little technology, surprisingly enough, given the Belt and Road Initiative and all sorts of different really interesting things that China's doing to kind of become a world trade owner in some ways. And so what you either have is a very high quality tool that's based on very, very little data, which is manually collected, and it takes an immense amount of time to be able to do anything, and even then it's really retrospective. Like, they have no idea what's going on for hours between noon and noon on any given day. And so that's the top left. Or, and this is the more forward-thinking companies like Maersk, they do have a lot of data coming back to shore, but they don't have the appropriate tools to make sense of it. They haven't really invested in any modern software providers or services to be able to help do this. And so what you have is a bunch of companies that really have no idea what's going on and have no ability to get that information across their whole organization in a way that makes it really actionable. And so we see this opportunity to kind of be the best of both worlds, that why don't you get a great tool that uses a lot of data to try and get some more things here. And so what we did and started thinking about was, what are all the different inputs that could make one platform to kind of help them do everything that they do better. And so it wasn't just about ship data. It started becoming, how do we help them do some of the reporting that they're actually doing on a day-to-day basis? Can we take commercial data that is driving the economics of all of these different voyages and bring that in, kind of contextualize the ship data we're getting to maybe be able to help them do that better in the future as well as all the other third-party data, which really is not being brought together in a single platform right now. They have 3 or 4 different systems that give them weather, the AIS location, which is a global standard to see ships' positions. You can actually go on the web right now and search AIS data and see where all these vessels in the world are. There's a lot of problems with AIS data. I don't want to go into it now, but happy to chat about that later and where the pitfalls are there. And so what we really thought was really important is being able to have a platform that spanned the entire operation. And so when we think about ship performance, that usually just sits in the technical team. But if you really wanted to do this in a way that influenced the way that global trade could actually change, or maybe you change the economics, you'd have to be able to influence the whole team in a way that it becomes very actionable. And so we are trying to build a single platform to create unified fleet intelligence. And this can mean a lot of things, everything from ship performance to really understanding how ship performance translates into commercial performance, which is some of the things that we're really starting to get into now, which are really exciting. And so what we've done since we've raised about $2 million in March is really said, listen, we can get on vessels, and they will say yes to that, and in fact, they want it. The market is shifting right now. They're going through this entire change around digitalization, which is, again, mind-blowing to think about in 2018, that they don't necessarily know where their vessels are at sea right now. That is mind-blowing to me. And they are starting to also believe that is mind-blowing. So things are changing, and we've gotten on several different vessels across 3 different sectors, so tanker, gas, and bulk. This is the team now. So we are 13 strong. We come from places like Google, Amazon, and a lot of leading tech companies. And really what we believe is that there is a better way and more efficient way that we can be moving things around the world. And the implication of doing that well is owners make a lot of money. The world is less polluted. And hopefully we have a really great business that kind of helps support this stuff in the future. That's what we do.
Very cool. Oops. Thank you very much. So,
thanks, Matt.
What is it like going to all those shipping companies and saying, "Hey, I'm a software guy. Well, of course you should be using software."
Yeah, it's not so much going to a shipping company and say, "Hey, I'm a software guy." It's "Hey, don't you want to be making more money?" The shipping industry is surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, extremely monetarily driven. So that being said, the way that we pitch and the way that we talk about things and the way that we sell is also a pretty clear differentiator between us and other maritime software players. So we're not coming in and saying, "Hey, pay us $100,000 up front." We say, "Hey, listen, we know you don't trust us. We know you don't understand any of this, but let's create a pricing structure that works for you." And so that is a core fundamental thing that when we thought about how we would actually do this. How do you get a Greek who has worked with someone for 55 years to say, "I'm not going to use that guy. I'm going to use this"? And it's like, and so it's funny, but it's also the core critical part of us getting this right. And so a lot of it's relationship driven. It's spending time with them and their families. It's going and having drinks often. It's sitting down and talking about their family problems that they're having, and it's a very different kind of enterprise sell than I think a lot of the typical SaaS plays. So right now it's about building reputation, and so that doesn't come easy, and we take it super seriously.
So this is really cool. My question is, it sounds like there's a lot of ways you could, go with this, and it seems like the whole system needs to be overhauled. So from a product perspective, where do you focus on, deriving that first value, having that killer app? And then sort of as a follow-on, I don't know, but how much sensor data is there? Is there like a predictive maintenance play there? How do you integrate that from an IoT perspective?
Sure. So some of the most core and critical value adds that we found initially was just having a user-friendly UI. So assuming, of course, you can actually get the correct amount of data that you need to do what we believe to be some really interesting stuff in the future, they are sick of looking at .NET products. They don't want solutions that are built on Windows 95. They all have Facebook. They all have Instagram. Their kids all have Instagram. They know what it could be now. And I'd say it's taken, that opportunity really only became apparent maybe 2 years ago. But what we found is that that's a huge part for being able to add value. They have solutions right now where they can look at data, but it's impossible to do anything with. It takes an hour to get the results you need. Whereas here it's like a click. It's a modern React front end. Like these little things are making quite a difference in the enterprise space right now. And can you remind me again the sensor data values?
Yeah.
So there's over 2,500 signals on any of these ships. Depending on the sector, gas ships have over 5,000. And so they're monitoring everything from open valves to pressures to temperatures on every pipe. Of course, getting the data off the ship is largely still a large problem, right? You're still reliant on VSAT networks, which has its own challenges, and that's part of the magic here is you can't just go and decide you're going to do this. It's quite a bit of work to try and create a system that scales with the kind of VSAT connectivity issues that exist in the world today, let alone being able to do that reliably. So my co-founder literally we haven't been able to connect to a ship in a couple days, and he finally was able to get on board. I say on board, it's really just remote in through an SSH, and it's been really interesting. So there's a lot of interesting tech problems.
Hi, I know it sounds really interesting. So the owners are obviously going to be very excited about this because there's potential for them to make more money. But how do you change the user behavior for the lower level people? the guys that are on the ship, the technicians and stuff? What are the challenges that you've seen there?
So crews are a big question mark right now for us. So they, depending on the owner, some of them have more robust satellite access to their crews than others. Some just say, absolutely not. Crew does not get internet for months. They just don't get it. They don't talk to their families. They can't email. Can't do any of that stuff. So that is a very real reality right now in shipping. So when it comes to the ways that we have decided to, or at least look at the market, is first and foremost, we're going to try and help the short side teams. And we're working on ways to try and engage the crew in a way that becomes important. I take the exact same example. I wouldn't call them any lower level. These are just people that have different jobs. First and foremost, it's like very actively engaging with them, finding out what's the one or two problems that they actually have. And turns out most of them are pretty straightforward and very solvable in today's software landscape. Again, it's just having someone, a designer, go and actually sit with them and listen to what they have to do. Turns out most maritime software companies haven't really done that. So again, some of it's about process. So I know I'm over.
All right, Anthony, thank you so much. Wonderful.
Thanks, Matt.